Hello everybody. Today I want to talk about a film called Terri, directed by Azazel Jacobs from 2011. The reason that I chose this film is that earlier this week I had the pleasure of going to the Paris Theater located right near the Plaza Hotel in Central Park. And at the Paris Theater, they were playing this film called Opening Night, directed by John Cassavetes, one of my all-time favorite directors for a litany of reasons, of which I won't go into, but save for a future video. And they did it in remembrance of the late Jenna Rollins, who just passed away. And Azazel Jacobs was the one presenting this film in part to discuss what influenced his latest film, Three Daughters, which is now playing in theaters, that I've heard raving reviews about, and the trailer itself looked pretty interesting. So he gave a sort of forward before the screening started of why he picked the film and what inspired him, and it just kind of caught my eye, his name at least. And so as I was on Criterion Channel today, I was just browsing of what to watch, and it seemed like they had made a selection of his earlier films. And this one I just stumbled upon and just figured, why not? Give it a shot. So the story follows this kid named Terri, played by Jacob Wysocki. Hopefully I'm saying that last name right. And Terri is a bit of a loner in his small town that he occupies. He loves wearing pajamas everywhere, and his reason is that it's comfy, and so why the hell not? And he takes care of his uncle. His mom and dad aren't really in the picture, and his uncle is suffering through dementia, it seems like, and Terri is just making sure that he, is put to bed and has his med and essentially sort of taking care of him. So right away, coming of age is the genre, at least. It's sort of modified in such a way where you have a kid who's trying to come into his own, trying to understand these new experiences, these changes that he's undergoing, but he is forced to kind of fast forward through all that to essentially act as sort of a guardian towards his uncle, who, there's shades of him having it all together, but mostly he seems very withdrawn and kind of in a state of delirium. There's some instability going on in terms of the dynamic of that household. But Terri, he goes to this high school in this small town, and he's just constantly being harassed. He is on the bigger side in terms of it. He's pretty large, and obviously the pajamas also make him an easy target from everybody else, and he just doesn't really give much resistance. I mean, he sort of takes it and just tries to endure his days being at that high school, or maybe it's like middle school, I should say more appropriately. The age is never really defined, but I think we can interpret that it is middle school. It gets to a point where he is then asked to go to the assistant principal's office, and this is where we meet John C. Reilly, who's kind of like the highlight name that everyone is familiar with, and who, in my opinion, in this film, I think really does a good job of being this, all around just pretty solid authority figure, one that is able to be the enforcement of policy of what not to do within the school, but then also try to be a peer towards the kids that are sort of labeled as problems, or maybe aren't fitting in as much, which Terri kind of finds himself in throughout this film. He just can't really connect with anyone around him, and I think the core of the film is Terri and John C. Reilly's character, Fitzpatrick, forming a connection with each other. Fitzpatrick he kind of sees what Terry's going through. He sees the struggle and wants to allow him to sort of maybe provide sanctuary from all the harassment that he's sort of enduring. Because I think inside he sees an interiority that is very well intentioned, and sees past this sort of like silence as someone who is a bit tormented inside. And that's the whole thing with these coming of age films, is that the protagonists within this genre are often grappling with huge dilemmas in life, but they aren't aware of what the solution is. They're sort of wrestling with it impulsively, and they just don't know really ultimately what they're feeling. It's all very foreign to them, and I think that's exemplified a lot in the film, where Terri has just these new experiences of forming trust with another human being. But it can even be as crass as drinking for the first time, or just seeing someone naked for the first time and not knowing really how to react to that entirely. It's all very awkward, and it's never smooth. And I think this film does a really good job at kind of exposing that side of growing up and not knowing where your place is, where your social standing is with other people, and sort of figuring it out as you go along. With Terri, he considers his relationship with Fitzpatrick very important. Once he notices that Fitzpatrick is giving similar treatment to the other kids that he finds, in his words, to be monsters, he gets really sort of upset about it, because just much of how much he genuinely loves Fitzpatrick, he doesn't want to see that relationship in any sort of negative light. He wants to feel like he can trust Fitzpatrick with just everything that's sort of stewing within him. We see the relationship between Fitzpatrick and him sort of blossom into is something very different than a lot of other coming of age films don't really see. You often see the kid who is sort of trying to understand themselves, interacting with kids their own age, and then finding themselves through conflict with them, or just with the world in general. Alienation often being a common theme. But the thing about with Terri and Fitzpatrick is that I think Terri finally finds someone who is able to kind of sort of semi-serve the parent role to him and guide him into a world that he is struggling to navigate through. Because obviously at home he has to take care of his uncle in many ways, but for the first time he feels like someone is taking care of him and actually providing some sort of love for him. More about Fitzpatrick and Terri's relationship from the film is that it gradually breaks from it being this like authority figure talking down to Terri to one where in some ways they're equals in how they like see each other, where the trust really does sort of begin to solidify. And I thought that was sort of really well done, where I guess you don't really see that relationship often that much, because it's usually the person who's older is often just patronizing to someone who's younger. But in this way, it was really cool just to see, I guess, John C. Reilly's character Fitzpatrick not lecture at Terri, but try to understand where he's coming from. And I'm sure that's a very rare quality, especially when you're older and you have your own set of problems. So I think that's a good model for, trying to understand adolescents, especially whose hormones are just spiraling all over the place. And just in terms of Terri's character throughout the film, he's very silent and reserved to himself. Even there's instances where he meets a friend, Heather, who is also tormented by the school's bullies. Their conversations are just exchanged through note form, so we often are kind of focused in on Terri's reactions towards people around him. There's a tenderness within him, right? Even though he might not know why he's doing the things that he does, because often in the film he's asked like, "What? Why'd you do this? And why'd you do that?" And his answers aren't always self-assured. They're often just because it was just what I do, or it's just what I feel, and that's it. And yeah, and in this film he's really just trying to understand or sort of conquer how much he loathes just living his life. As far as coming of age goes, you know, this film really touches on this feeling that we have when we're at that age, especially, you know, when we're adolescents, where we just have like a hyper fixation on sex. We don't know what it is before we've done it. We're curious as hell, and I think this film touches on that, especially in the scene at the shed where Terri sees Heather and she, you know, gets more disoriented and she becomes a little bit more promiscuous. It sort of blows his mind, and we could see that from how overwhelmed he is and stuff. But I think that's such a true sentiment when you're a kid, where sex becomes put on this like huge pedestal for the mere fact that like you really don't know, like it's such a thing that you are so curious about and so far out of reach. But it's more powerful before you've committed the act itself. And so I felt that was sort of true, at least to experiences that I've had when I was just, you know, at that age that they're portraying in this film. You know, you really share Terry's sentiment, I would say, as far as him feeling that everyone's sort of out to get him in a lot of ways, how he's perpetually a victim from everyone's scrutiny, and he can't help but, you know, have fatigue over that. And I think you really feel for that within his character, and he's as confused as everybody else, and he's just a little bit more shy about it. And I think just the fact that he is shy just makes him an easy target. So you really do feel throughout the film Terry and how aggravated he is with something that he really has little control over, of just how he looks and not knowing really how he feels about everything. He definitely feels pent up and stressed, but he just has no way of articulating that, essentially. So that's really all I had to say about the film. It's unsettling at times because of just how much of it's willing to be blunt about this experience of a kid who's tormented by the world in his eyes. The world's messy, and we're all just trying to do our best, and I think that's a good message to sort of follow through on. I would say that the film overall is pretty enjoyable when you consider both Terry's performance and Fitzpatrick as a character who straddles the line between being this like authority figure in school, but also seemingly just very decent guy trying to do the best that he can, you know, even though he might make mistakes along the way. It's different because of the relationship from other coming of age films. It might remind you of, especially if you're older, what it was like to experience just being just spiraling and just trying to figure out the world, much like Terry does in this film. And he does such a good job with his like facial expressions of just feeling so conflicted about like what's before him, you know. And yeah, so that was it. So thank you for watching. I hope to see you soon, and yeah, that's it for me.